getting honey from a nuke than you will
Starting
from a package.
Yeah,
from
okay.
A package, yeah.
All right. I lit my smoker a couple of nights ago, and
Good.
I got some red flames going out the spout.
Well, that's a little too hot. You got it
cooking.
going good. You need to put something, some more. What are you fueling it with?
I got some smoker pellets from Tractor Supply, and I have some scrap wood from, I build toy models, and it's
Okay. Yep.
It's that real thin, kind of flimsy kind of wood. You just punch out the pieces, and that's what's left over. And I broke it all up.
Okay.
That's some newspaper.
Yeah, you're gonna need, maybe after you mow your lawn, get some grass clippings or something. You don't want fire coming out of the spout, because if you have fire coming out, you're gonna burn your bees.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Yeah,
but I left it alone for a minute or so, and then it started doing regular smoking.
Okay. Yep. Because you just want the fire to kind of smolder. It's
Okay.
a kind of a smoldering fire, so you got lots of smoke and you keep it burning. So.
Well, I'm glad I did that, so I know what to expect.
Well, that's probably something that we all should practice now and then, is lighting the smoker and keeping it lit. But I think most of us, myself included, is, you go out there the first day and away you go and try to find something to smoke with. So good. Anybody else here have any questions?
I was just going to say a comment. It's Tammy.
Yep.
What I learned this year was kind of, when I go out there to inspect the hive, especially because you might be taking your supers off to get further down into the hive, is take something out to set your boxes on. Because I didn't do that in the beginning, and anytime I'd set them on the grass, they'd just collect leaves and grass and all that kind of junk on the bottom of the box. So if you have like another box or something that you can just set them on, it makes it a lot easier to just then pick it back up and not have to have all that debris on there.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a video. I'll post it, but how I usually throw my lid on the ground upside down and then stack my boxes I take off on the lid, kind of, I call it kitty whopper, about 45. So they're only touching like in 4 places. So the surface area isn't very much, so you're not smashing bees. So, but that's a good point, Tammy. Tammy texted me today. She was taking a look at her bees and she wanted to know if she should put her mouse guard on. The reason I would still keep the mouse guards on is it still gets cold at night. The mice move around at night, and there's not going to be very many, especially if the bees are up high in your box. They'll come out the entrance during the day, but they're all clustered up high. The mice sneak in. They don't make the nest right in front, the front entrance. They always sneak off to the back, so they could easily make a nest this time of year with the bees not being very active every day. So I'd keep it on probably for close to another month, somewhere in there, unless we get some really, really warm weather and they really get active. And then I would maybe get rid of it. So the bees can come and go a little easier. Tammy.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any questions? See if I can share my screen. Okay. Just sometimes technology. I just need to make sure it's we're a go here. Tam, I don't think you were at the meeting a couple times ago. Tammy, you asked one time about a nuke box. This is what we call a nuke box. It's like a mini 5-frame hive. Instead of a 10-frame, they only hold 5. It's really common now. When I first started beekeeping, they didn't have 5-frame nuke boxes. We just put our bees in the 10-frame box and just put them in the middle and put empty frames on the outside. And that's how I made splits for a long time till I started buying 5 and 4-frame boxes. In fact, these are just 4 frames. I caught a swarm and they didn't really fit, or they filled the bottom box right away. So you just add the next one. and it condenses the heat and it confines the heat a little bit when there's not a lot of bees in there. So usually before I put them in a 10 frame box, they're usually 4 high. So they're like 16 frames. And then I'll divide them out and widen them out because a lot of times when it's cool in the spring, they will work a lot faster with that confined heat in the middle. So those are,
I see the bricks underneath the hives there.
oh,
Just, yeah, okay.
Yep. See, that's how I put my bricks here. Like Tammy said, it's nice to have a box to put stuff on. I have the tendency when I take my frame out to inspect it, I like to have this back brick sticking out just a little bit, and I can put that frame, prop it up behind the hive so it's not in the grass, it's not covered with dirt, mud, sticks. But I try to leave enough space back here, but that's easier said than done too, because sometimes they don't. Like this hive here, I'm sure it slid to the back. So, and here's the nuke box. I was catching a swarm. Everybody's marching in. But that's what I pretty much use nuke boxes for, to get small hives, get them going. It gives them, they move a little quicker. But if you don't have a nuke box, when you catch a swarm and you put them in a 10 frame box, use what you have. The bees will adapt. Tonight, we're going to talk about the pests of bees, and varroa mite is our number one pest. Varroa mites kill more hives than anything else. They even kill more hives, I think, than beekeepers do. Beekeepers are probably a close second to killing bees, but the varroa mite is definitely public enemy number one. Don't let anybody fool you about, you don't have to check for mites. It's not necessarily the mites, but it's the mite virus complex, we're going to call this. The mites move the viruses. So since we're in the middle of a pandemic, let's say the only way you could catch the COVID-19 was from a mosquito bite. That's kind of what happens with the varroa mites. The viruses are around, but they don't have a way to enter the bee till the mite chews a hole in it, punctures it. The virus is in the saliva of the mite. All these viruses enter our bees. Once the virus is in the bee, it takes over, and then it weakens the bees, and they shortens their life till it just decimates the hive, usually in the wintertime. That's keep piling the stresses on, and this is what you get. So, but they are definitely public enemy number one. This is how big a mite is on a bee. So you can imagine when your bees are running around in your hive, it's very hard to see a mite on a bee. And in fact, most of the mites will be on the bottom side in between these plates. These plates on the abdomen kind of flex, and those mites scoot up underneath there. And when you start to see mites on your bees like this one, that you usually have a really big infestation of mites at that point. So we need to keep track of the mites ahead of time. This circle here, there's a mite on that bee, and you can see how hard it is to see that mite. One of the easy ways to find mites are on the white larvae when they're pupating, especially on the drones. You can pull that white drone out, and those brown mites stand out like a sore thumb. So it's a really easy way. Check for your mites. I use an uncapping fork, and I'll spear into the drone larvae right here and pull them out, and they pop out just like this, and take a look at them. If I do a couple spears and pull 20, 30 drones out and I don't see any mites, I roughly know that I don't have too much of a problem. If you put one larvae out like this and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mites on it, you got a big serious problem. Even 2 mites on one larvae would be you're looking at having an issue with it. So There are ways to treat for mites. I'm going to get on my soapbox here. You're going to see a lot of people say that you don't have to treat for mites. We want to raise our bees to defend on the mites on their own through genetics. That doesn't happen overnight. And just like with the pandemic, mainly the weak die. So that's the theory in these bees. Well, we have bad genetics, so we're going to let the weaker hives die from the mites, and the ones that survive, called survivor stock, well, they can handle this mite load. Well, that would be just like us saying, well, we're going to let everybody die from the COVID, and the ones that survive it are the strong. They got the good genes, so we'll just move on from there. Well, that's not the way we treat things. I don't think any of us would let our dogs die from mange or fleas or ticks the same way. If we had a dog and came in the house covered with fleas, we would treat for it. And this is why we should treat for your mites. You know, our bees are opportunists, and when the neighbor's hive starts to collapse from having too many mites because they didn't treat it, and it's full of honey, your bees will go over there and help themselves to all the honey in there. And they also bring back a whole load of mites with them while they're stealing this honey, because the mites are looking for some new blood. They need some new bees to keep propagating. So as your bees attack this other hive, they bring back the mites. You think you just treated for mites, you inspected for mites, you have no mites. And a month later, you're just being overrun with mites. And that's because your hive went over and robbed somebody else's who wasn't taking care of their hive. And that's why we all need to take care of our hives. If you decide to be a treatment-free beekeeper, this is America. You can do what you want. If you start to get overrun with mites, the best thing you could do is kill that hive with soapy dishwater. You mix some Dawn dishwater, real soapy, and you dump it in the hive, and all the bees suffocate. And you're going to kill the mites and the bees, but at least you're not reinfecting your whole neighborhood. So that's part of my soapbox for tonight. But there's a lot of people out there, and if you're on Facebook, you see some people didn't treat properly, and when your bees are failing, let's say September, October, when everybody else's bees are flying, that's where you can reinfest the neighborhood. If your bees collapse this during the last cold spell we had, like a lot of bees died in this last cold spell, then you're not spreading too many mites around, because the mites died in the frigid 10 below zero weather along with the bees. So they're all dead. If somebody's bees come over and start stealing the honey, all they're going to do is get the honey. They're not going to get a load of mites with them.
Roger, it's Tammy. I have a question.
Yes.
When you get a nuke or a package, do they check those bees that you're buying for mites?
Probably not that package. They should have been inspected. Let's say the package apiaries were inspected down in Florida or Georgia or California, wherever, and they'll probably show that they had low mites. I doubt if they had zero mites. Same way buying packages, sometimes people get a lot of hive beetles with them. I don't think there's quite as bad now as it was a few years ago, but a few years ago, every spring we were getting re-inoculated with hive beetles coming in packages of bees. In Ohio, to sell bees like a nuke, they need to be inspected. If they had a really high mite count, then something would need to be done. But the reproduction of the mite, it's especially like something like this. If these were two females in this cell and they each laid 4 eggs, the population every 21 days doubles. So it goes from 2 to 4 to 8, but it can grow exponentially pretty fast. You're in Michigan, and it's pretty much free game in Michigan, Tammy. You know, anybody can, as far as I'm aware, is I can sell stuff. It's not inspected. You don't have a state apiary inspection. So it's a talk. I know some people that treat for mites, like with oxalic acid. They dribble it on their package when they first get it to get rid of any mites because they all are exposed. So that's a yes and no answer, I think, Tammy. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
No, that's all right.
It's one of
I
those
just-
gray ones.
Yeah.
They technically you know, the reputable people won't be selling anything with high mites, but chances of them having 1 or 2 mites in a package is very realistic.
Okay. I just didn't know, like, if you end up having a mite problem, like, is it because of the environment that your area is in, or maybe you just got a bad package or something, you know? But
Well, it can be both ways, to be honest. Once you're in this business as long as I am, you know, we would rather have people buy nukes because they're going to start out stronger. You're probably going to have a little bit better genetics, but that's not a foolproof way either. So, and we can't produce enough nukes up here, so people are going to have to buy packages. So, but
okay, thank you.
the chances of you first starting is probably they came with the package or in the nuke that you bought, but they also can pick them up in the environment. We're sure that mites fall off field bees on flowers, and the next bee that comes along scoops them up and takes them back to the hive. Drones in the whole scheme of the mites need a couple more days. I think we talked about that back in biology day, but drones are very notorious for drifting. So if you have 2 or 3 hives sitting in your backyard, the drones have the tendency to hit the wrong hive and go in. And since they quite possibly have the extra mites on them, it's easy to move the mites with the drifting too. This instrument, the Varroa Easy Check, is sold probably by all the big dealers. And to be honest, I bought one just last week. I've done the old way of using a quart jar with some screen on it, dumping it through a coffee filter. Once I used one of these, it is so much easier. There's a line up here. I think like this line here is where you fill it with alcohol. There's a line on the inside cylinder here with the holes in it. Shows you how full to fill it with bees. Screw the lid on, swirl it around. Everybody dies. The mites dislodge from the bees. The bees stay in the center container, and the mites fall down here. It's an easy way to count them. It is much easier than dumping stuff and shaking and the way we've been doing it for years. And once I used one of these, like I said, I've got the old school way and I got the new school way, and I'm going with the new school way. So I highly recommend somebody buying one of these. We've talked about the Honeybee Health Coalition. Everybody got one of those. That's the Bible of Varroa. They have videos of how to use the Varroa check, how to use all these chemicals that we're going to talk about, what works best when. But I've been in here long enough, and all the mites build resistance to most of our miticides after about 5 or 6 years, it seems like, mainly because of overuse. When I first started, Apistan was the only thing we had to kill the Varroa mite. And it wasn't long, and that didn't start to work, so we moved to check mite. And whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Check mite lasted a few years. These are all synthetics. They have like one mode of action. It isn't long, and since our mites are reproducing at such a high rate, you know, if you kill 99% of them with this Coumaphos, this check mite, that means there's 1% that lived. And when that 1% keeps breeding over and over, pretty soon we have a whole population that is immune to this check mite or the Apistan. Apivar's been out for a few years, and this is starting to have resistance issues. These are called synthetic chemicals. They're on the harder end of treating for mites. They're a synthetic chemical. We've branched off. We have the Apogard. It comes in little foil container, or if you have a lot of hives, you can buy it in a bucket. It's a thymol, the thymol plant. Epivar Life comes in these little I think they're called wafers, but you break these wafers off, put them in the hive. I think this is a thymol treatment too. And then we have Hop Guard made from the hops, same thing with beer. But it's a little bit softer, easier on the bees. Then we have the organic acids, which is the formic acid of Formic Pro over here, oxalic acid on the left. Formic Pro, as of right now, is the only thing you can use to kill mites with your honey supers on. By reading the Honeybee Health Coalition book, it explains all that out of when is best to use it. They have an app to put on your phone. You put in you answer their questions, and they spit out an answer of what should be used for your mites. Everything has its pros and cons. I mean, right now everybody's using organic or the oxalic acid. It's the big thing, but I mean, look at the label. Danger, poison, skull and crossbones. It can be dangerous. Wear your protective gear. Make sure you put your rubber gloves on. Oxalic acid, when you use that as a vapor, you need a respirator with the correct organic acid filters in it. I used to think I was a big strong man, and I used Formic Pro. It was formic acid. You cut these packets open, they about take your breath away if you got your nose anywhere close, and I would just grab them out, put them on the hive, shut the hive up, and about 3 days later, the skin started peeling off my fingers, and I thought I had done something, like my hands are getting to be pansy, till I had like 3 blisters on the back of my hand. Then I realized it was the formic acid that had basically took about 3 layers of skin off my fingers and blistered the back of my hand. So I learned my lesson. I learned it the hard way, but use the protective gear. This is the way we use oxalic acid. Like I said, it's the most popular. There's one way: you put it in this little burner, hook it up to a battery, it gets hot, it vaporizes. The other way is to mix the oxalic acid with sugar water, and it's called a dribble method, and you squirt it down on the bees. It sounds very harmful to the bees. I mean, it's very caustic, but right now that's the best thing we have going. I was very impressed with it. It took me a long time to use it, because if I have to wear a respirator and gloves and goggles, my brain tells me, well, this can't be good for the bees. But in all honesty, since I started using the vaporization, my bees are very, very clean in spring from varroa mites. Up until that point, you'd always start out with some mites. But doing this, I do it when the bees are broodless. So I usually do it around Thanksgiving time. That way, all the mites are exposed to the chemical. They're not hiding underneath the cappings. When the mites are in our hives normally, about 60% of them are underneath the cap brood wax. And that's where the mother mite lays her eggs, and all the mating goes on inside underneath the cappings. When that baby bee emerges, it emerges with a mite or maybe 2 mites on it. For them to crawl in another open, they crawl in the larvae just before it's capped. So most of the time, 60% of them are hiding under the cappings. So it takes multiple treatments to kill all these mites, and you need to stay on top of them, because once the mites get out ahead of you, they're transmitting the viruses. And we'll go over that next. One thing I want to make sure you're aware of is use what is labeled to be used on bees. Both of these chemicals here are the same active ingredient as something that we use in our apiary, but it's just a different mode of action. So they're not labeled to be put on bees. This you'd probably have to mix with like some water and spray it on there. I don't see it on Craigslist anymore, but it used to be. This stuff was always being advertised to, to kill mites on your bees. Well, it is not labeled that way. So please stick with what is labeled, because it's very easy to kill your bees with some of this stuff. Remember, we're trying to kill a small pest on a little bit bigger bee. We're killing an arachnid the size of a pinhead on one of our little bees. So it does it a little bit too much and you'll kill your bees too. Because most of these, especially the hard chemicals, they will kill your bees. Enough of it would kill a human, I'm sure. So, and the oxalic acid will burn your lungs. So that's why we need to wear a respirator. There are IPM methods of controlling mites. If you see one of these green frames, this green frame is all drone brood. And the idea behind it is you let the bees draw this out, let the queen bee lay all this drone in there. In 21 days before the drone hatches, you pull that frame out, you put it in your freezer, and you're going to kill all the drones on there, but you're also going to kill all the mites that are in that drone brood, because the varroa mites know the difference between drone brood and worker brood, and they conjugate towards the drone brood because they have 3 extra days during pupation to mature into adult mite. The green frames are designated that color, so when you open up your hive, you can remember which frame is which. Here's my pick that I like to use. And see, I just stick it underneath those cappings, and you pull it up, and you can pull the drone brood right out with it, and you can take a good look at it. Those varroa mites, they're a lot easier to see that way. Varroa mites are brown, our bees are brown, they blend in, they're very difficult to see. Chances of brand new beekeepers seeing mites the first year are slim to none, so you won't see them on your bees. Another pest that moved in the early 2000s were hive beetles. These are a really small beetle. They're bigger than the varroa mite, but I'm going to say 1/8 of an inch long. They run real fast. Their shells are fairly hard, and the bees have trouble breaking the shell. So they have the tendency to chase the small hive beetles around till we call it beetle jail, but they kind of push them up into a corner. And one of the places that you'll see them is when you pop your inner cover off real quick, the bees are scattering, and it's like letting the door to the jail open, and the hive beetles start running everywhere too. And a lot of times they'll be cornered up between maybe the inner cover and 2 frames. So they got them right in a tight spot, and they'll start running around. Hit them with your hive tool as many as you can the first time. The problem with them, and I was talking to Jim earlier, is the hive beetles lay eggs on your frame. The eggs hatch into little worms. The worms start boring around. Here's the size of a hive beetle. So these are the bees chasing a couple hive beetles around. If we were in live class like we usually are, I bring some samples in, some dead ones. So you can see they're about 1/8 of the size of a bee. But here's the worms. Here's where the real damage happens. So they lay the eggs hatch into these little worms, and the worms start boring through your frames. They really like the pollen, they like the honey. And as they're boring through here, they're eating on one end and defecating on the other end as they go through. It turns into a slimy mess. There's yeast involved. Pretty soon your honey turns from being a thick liquid to a thin liquid. It starts fermenting. It is one of the grossest, stickiest messes you'll ever see in your life. I've never had a frame this bad. I've had some frames that got, we call it slimed, where all this stuff is all slimy. I froze it, killed all the larvae, got it back out of the freezer, and that frame stunk so bad. I said, there's no way I'm putting that in the beehive. And it went to the chicken yard, and the chickens got to eat the honey, the pollen, the little larvae in there. They ate everything. So it can be quite the mess. Here, another frame with it. You can see where this is just capped honey. The worms are coming out. Of course, none of us are going to want to eat any honey that's had worms running through it. But it will become such a stinky mess. The bees have been known to abscond the hive, which means it just stinks so bad they just give up, they leave, take off, find a new spot. The hive beetles can fly, so there are some treatments. Some of the treatments inside the hive this is a pan that you put some oil in. It would go on your bottom board, screen on top so the bees can't get in it. The bees chase the beetles around. They fall in the oil and die. They make these little traps that go in between the frames with the same action. The bees chase the beetles around. The beetles try to find a place to hide, and there's oil in these traps, and the beetles go in the trap and they drowned in the oil. I don't see this as popular, probably because we don't have CDs anymore, but we used to take CD cases, and there's some little holes in them, little holes enough that the hive beetles would run in there. So you would put that in your hive, stick it up like on the inner cover. The bees chase the beetles around. They go hide in the case, pull it out, throw it in a bucket of water or a bucket of alcohol, kill them. Right now, the big thing also is use a microfiber cloth, which again, the bees chase the beetles into the microfiber. The beetles get tangled up in it and die. Sometimes you will have a few bees caught in it. Unscented Swiffer pads work also because they have lots of fibers there that the beetles can get caught on. That works. Whatever you do, do not use poisons that are not labeled for your hive, such as cockroach killer, which I've seen more than one video of people using cockroach killer like in these cassette cases, because their theory is, well, the bees can't get in there, so I'm going to put this poison in here to kill all the hive beetles. One, it's not legal. And two is, well, what happens if that beetle runs across the cockroach killer and then runs back out across the hive before he dies? So now he just spread cockroach killer all over your hive. Last summer, some guy on Ohio Beekeeping posted a video of that, and I called him out, and he thought he was in the right till I called it cockroach killer, because that's what this is labeled for, cockroaches. And within an hour, he pulled the video back off of line because I must have shamed him bad enough. But you will see people pushing all these kind of wrong chemicals to put in your hive. There's some videos that are advertisements that pop up on my Facebook page, since beekeeping is the center of my life. So I get a lot of this stuff. And there's one now, we'll be talking about wax moth here in a second, but there's one for wax moth chemicals in the hive. And I know there's no legal in-hive treatment for wax moth. So People will sell you anything. Oh, right here we got the wax moth. Wax moth is another problem for our bees, and it's primarily a stored equipment problem. It's again the larvae stage that's the real mess. The wax moth is like kind of like a cupboard moth that you would get like in your cupboard, like in your wheat products. They're small, they're yellow, but in this case, they spin big webs. So these worms spread constant webs, and they like eating the dark wax and pollen more than honey and clean wax. So they're basically the garbage disposals. And it's probably Mother Nature's way of, if a hive would die of a disease, the wax moth move in, chew everything to smithereens, and now that empty cavity in the tree is cleaned up because all the spores of the other bacteria got eaten by the wax moth. But they poop as they eat, kind of like the hive beetle. And like here, it's all webbing, poop, and the wax is destroyed, and they keep repopulating. It is a mess to clean up too. It's pretty gross. It stinks. And here's a frame where you can see where they've been burrowing through the dark wax. And if they come in your hive, there's a reason they're in your hive. They're always in the environment. They're always trying to get in at night. Wax moth aren't a problem when it's cold because they all froze. They don't fly. But once we get into like July, August, wax moth could be a problem. But they only move into weak hives. The strong hives will keep them repelled out. If they do get in there and lay an egg, the egg hatches, the bees grab that larvae, haul it out as garbage. But they will overtake a weak hive if given the chance. And like I said, they do prefer the dark black wax. They also bother stored equipment. So come fall, you've taken your honey off, you got honey supers sitting around, the wax moth can move in because it's still been warm. There's a couple ways to manage it. One of them is using mothballs, and this is called paramoth. And there's two different active ingredients. You can buy this stuff from the bee supply store, or you can go down to your local hardware store, Walmart, Target, probably Kroger. Everybody sells mothballs, but there's two active ingredients. The para-dichlorobenzene is the correct active ingredient to buy. Do not use the naphthene. So N means no. And you need to read the ingredient label because sometimes you'll go to Walmart and they'll have the para-dichlorobenzene. The next time you go there, it may be the naphthene. It comes both in crystals and balls in the para-dichlorobenzene. I usually buy the crystals from the bee supply place, but if I can find mothballs with the para-dichlorobenzene, the bigger ball, it will last longer in your equipment. If you only got a couple hives, you can put them on somewhere on your property so they aren't in your way. Set them up on end so the sunlight can get in there, like it where it's dark. So the sunlight shines through. After we get a couple good hard frosts, you can put them away. The wax moth are done. So frost, freezing kills wax moth. So really, when I have several hundred honey supers to store. They start getting put away in September, October before it gets cold. I don't have any place big enough to store them outside, so they get put away. I sprinkle a little bit of mothballs, moth crystals in there, and push a mothball down in between a couple frames every couple supers. So that's how I keep them. I've had more than my share of wax moth problems. One of my biggest one was in my honey house with some old stored equipment that I hadn't tore apart yet in the fall, and the wax moth moved in and had a heyday. So it is a problem with stored equipment. You don't want to waste good comb. You know, good drawn comb can be used for everything, and you don't want the wax moth chewing it all up. So next spring when you need it, you still got it. We do have a couple brood diseases that can be a problem. They're both called foul brood. One's called American foul brood. The other one's called European foul brood. Both of them, if it's in the cap stage, we start to get little holes in. But this is primarily what I'm going to say European foul brood looks like. We talked about in biology class that we like the larvae real nice, bright, white, pearly white. You can see some of these are starting to turn yellow. Here's a yellow one. Here's a yellow one. This one's starting to shrink up. You can see it's deformed. This one's flattening out. Yellow, yellow. There's a nice white one, but this is a frame with really bad European foul brood. You want nice white pearly larvae. You also see that this is, I'm going to show you another picture of, we call it shotgun brood, where you got cap brood, you got some open brood, you got lots of open cells. The queen, when she lays, she just keeps laying like a bigger pattern, but within a day or so. So all this should be in a progression from small larvae to big larvae to cap larvae or all cap larvae. You shouldn't have this mixing of open larvae, no larvae. And what the bees have done is they've cleaned these sick ones out. If you don't have a very bad case and you have good hygienic bees, the bees will take care of some of this problem. So sometimes it can be hard to diagnose. Here again, here's your nice white pearly larvae, and here's a sick yellow larvae. This is what you don't want to see. It's transmitted by bacteria. So your bees raided the neighbor's hive that were suffering. They collapsed because of this. This back to the bees are opportunists, stealing the neighbor's honey. They don't always steal their mites, but they could bring back disease too. So that's why we need to take care of our stuff. Here again, back to the yellowing. I probably pushed the wrong button. Oh, here's some pictures of some frames, and these are good frames. There are a few missing cells here, but that's not bad. Here we got a nice tight brood pattern with some honey. I'm sure there's probably some open larvae out here. Here's a frame when you're using natural wax the first time. Sometimes you get lines in them from where the wire was because the queen doesn't want to lay on top of that wire for whatever reason. So you got a line here. It's a wire. This is a wire line. Here's a wire line. Here's a wire line. So think about if you see, especially if you see a designated pattern, here's brood that's hatching. A lot of times you'll see this in the spring is about the second or third round of bees raising larvae. She's lays larvae in a little small circle here in the center of this frame. It keeps getting bigger, 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 and then it hatches out. It's kind of the same way. The center hatches first, the circle keeps getting bigger, and a lot of times you'll see this out in here, it's hatching, and the queen has come back in here and relaid eggs. But it's a crazy brood pattern, but it's a spring brood pattern. This is kind of the onset of disease where you have all these extra little holes. See, it's not a nice tight pattern here. We got lots of hit and misses. Either you got a queen that's failing, If I find some disease, usually my first indication is I see a bad brood pattern. So then I really start looking to look down in these cells, look for eggs, look at the larvae. What color is my larvae? And back to the yellow. Guess I put plenty in there. American foul brood will smell, usually stinks pretty bad. The larvae die once they get capped over, so they sit in there for quite a while and really get stinky messy. European foul brood can be treated with antibiotics, but antibiotics are pretty hard to come by now because about 4 years ago, the FDA and USDA made regulations about feeding antibiotics. So now we need a prescription from a veterinarian to get antibiotics. American foul brood spores, the only way you can kill those spores once they get in your hive is by burning them. So you burn frame, bees, comb, everything. Dig a pit, start a fire, and burn everything up. It's the only way to really get rid of it. You can mask the disease with antibiotics, but like I said, you're only masking it. The spores are still there. They'll come back and reinfest the brood. And the way it gets moved around is the spores are there. They're in the pollen, the stored honey. The nurse bees eat it. It doesn't bother them, but when they regurgitate that food to the little larvae, it goes in the larvae's gut and it multiplies and it kills that larvae. American foul brood, if you would stick a stick in it and you spin it around and pull it out, it's real stringy. So that black icky goo will stretch out about 3 inches. So that's one way to tell. We do have new test strips that are kind of like the pregnancy test. You take some of that dead larvae, you put it on a stick that you buy from the bee supply place, and it will turn, I think it shows some bars. So if it tests positive, you get like 2 bars. If it's negative, you don't get any bars. So there are some tests for this stuff now. Strong hives, trying to stay away from your neighbors, but there's, when you have strong hives and your neighbors aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, just like the mites, our bees are opportunists. They'll bring this stuff back. American foul brood at one time was running rampant in the 30s. That's where our bee inspections started, was because of there was so much American foul brood. But with the new inspections and probably a lot of burning of hives, it's under control. There's not too many cases in Ohio of it anymore. Another brood disease is called chalk brood, and this is usually caused early in the spring, fungus. It's because it's cool and wet. What happens is the larvae turn into what they look like little pieces of chalk. And you usually don't see it in the hive as much as out front of the hive, where the bees are throwing these little larvae out and you see little pieces of chalk. There's not much we can do for that. We pray for a little bit warmer weather, drier weather, and it usually cures itself. If you were at the last bee meeting, there was a guy there talking about some of the probiotics help clear up some of his chalk brood. But it's just something to keep an eye out for. If you had a really bad frame of it, you could always pitch this whole frame, get rid of that fungus, and move on. Skunks and mice can be problems in our hives. Skunks are in the summertime. Mice usually stay out till fall, but they love having a nice, warm, dry place to spend winter, and a beehive can be one of those. The first indication that you have a skunk problem is you'll see claw marks on your entrance. And this is, I Right here at my house, I usually kill 2 skunks a year. And in fact, I saw my first skunk last Saturday or Friday night. You can see they come up here, they scratch on the bottom board. The bees come out to investigate, and the skunk scoops them up and starts eating them. And as far as I can tell and what I've read and been told, the skunk just sucked the juice out of the bees. They get a whole mouthful of these bees, they roll them around, they suck the juice out, and then they spit what looks like wads of tobacco, but you can always see bee parts in it. You can see some wings in here. Here's part of an abdomen. Here's a bee wing. Here's a wing. So I know it's not going out the digestive tract that fast because these little spitballs will be right in front of the hive, right where they're eating. Eat the bees. And that's why one of the reasons, if you get your bees a little bit higher up, can be a benefit, because when the skunk reaches up there, it exposes his belly, and their bellies are tender. The bees can get in there and sting them and drive them away. But apparently they don't mind a few stings in their mouths because they will eat your bees. This is what mice damage looks like. Mice gets in your hive in the wintertime. Of course, these are real foundation, so they just chew a hole. They usually chew about a hole big enough for about 3 frames. Make their nest, pull some leaves in, nuts. They don't eat the bees too much. If you would get shrews in your hive in the wintertime, they are meat eaters. They will eat your bees. But it's just a pain in the butt. You put mouse guards on in the fall to keep the mice out and take them off in the spring then. I use hardware cloth. 1/2-inch hardware cloth is my mouse guards. They make fancy mouse guards. I think every bee supply place sells some kind of mouse guards to put in front of your hive. Location of your hives in your yard. I guess we're going to move on to location. Ideally, if you could get a place where there's no wind and 100% sun, that would be ideal. But very few of us have the ideal setup. Windbreaks, especially for the wintertime, are good. If you live in the city, you have the natural city windbreak. Try to find as much sun as possible in your yard. Yeah, you don't want the bees right up by your house, so back along the property line or something is a great place. One thing is, just like all living things, bees need water. You can have water in many different ways. The bees really don't need to lap up water like our dogs and cats. This trickling fountain here with the water splashing on these rocks would be a great thing for the bees because they could stand on these stones and drink the water. Bird baths work good as long as you put some stones or some floating wood or something like that in, so the bees have somewhere, if they would slide in, they can get on the rock, get back out. Of course, with a pond, there's lots of shoreline for the bees to get water. This is one of my ways of watering some of my outyards. Is I cut a barrel in 2, I put some water plants in there, and the bees land on the water plants. These are water hyacinths, and they can get to the water. Tammy was over the other day getting a bottom board from me. I was telling her I've tried the kids' wading pools, but the problem was there's too much surface area and the water evaporates too fast. So we were constantly filling it with the water evaporation. The plants didn't like it because the water was too hot, but when these barrels are deep, I've had good luck with them. Bad water would be your neighbor's swimming pool. One way to make bad neighbors real quick is have a whole bunch of bees sitting over here lapping up the water. Buckets, straight line bucket here. So the bees will land and they'll try to get drinks out of here. But if they fall in, they have no way of getting up back out of the water. Same with this bird bath, it's too deep. The bees will find it and get a drink out of it. If it's at the neighbors, there's not much you can do. I catch rainwater in 5-gallon buckets here at my house. Most of the time they don't have lids on. The bees won't bother them, but about twice a year, you'll see a couple bees one day and the next day you'll have a handful of dead bees. I got to find a lid, put on the bucket so the bees can't get in. So they have a way of finding water. If you have a pool, your neighbors have a pool, the big thing is get your water out early. Get your bees trained to go to your water and not the neighbor's swimming pool. They love swimming pool water. We think it's the chlorine and salts and minerals that are in that water that the bees are attracted to. Some people put a little lemongrass scent in their water. I have a tendency to put a little vinegar in. It keeps the algae from not forming quite so fast. If I have small waters, and the big waters in the summer, I don't worry about them. I do put a couple goldfish in my big tanks to keep the mosquitoes under control because I don't want to be a mosquito breeder either. Here is some bad water, and the reason it's bad water is the water bowl's dry. So if you have a neighbor with a pool and you have a little water like this and you let it go dry, the day it goes dry, those bees need water. They're going to find it and they're going to go to your neighbors. So whatever you use, make sure it never runs out of water. So this gentleman had this bee water in an outyard. I know he didn't get there very often. It would go dry. The other thing is I would fill this whole bowl up with stones and water, not just half of it. So just my thought. Here's one of my waters. This was at a farmhouse. There was nobody living in the house, but we had barn cats. And the bees found the barn cat water. So you can see we put some bricks in here, rocks, sticks, wood. But this rock here is the rock they like because I think the water would migrate up through all these cracks. It was kind of porous. The bees loved it. And you can see up here at the top of the roof was the beehive. This was a swarm trap, and you could watch the bees go in a straight line from the hive to the water back and forth all day long. So you don't need to get it a long ways away. They will find the water, but water is very critical. You can see why I got several slides here. People with really close neighbors. The chances are they're going to see that beehive in your backyard. Explain to them bees. The best thing you can do is have a fence. The other thing you can do is don't put them in your front lawn. This was apparently a club member. I don't know who it is. I know who took the picture. He's another one of our members. But this person put his 2 beehives right here in the front lawn. Here's the sidewalk. And I know this is America and you should be able to do what you want with your lawn. But the problem was with this bees here, bees fly in and out of your hive in a straight line. So these bees are coming out of this hive and flying straight across the sidewalk. And what happened was the city of Northwood, we're thinking about making an ordinance to outlaw bees in the city because of this one person. The school was down the way. The school got involved. City was involved. I think the zoning inspector knew Dave Galler, who is one of our members, and they set up some rules. And you can still have bees in Northwood, but all it does is take one person to do some crazy things. I don't know why you'd put him in your front lawn, but he did. So remember, and I always used, before I had this picture, I'd tell people, don't put the bees on your front porch because they're going to fly straight in and out. Put them in the back. Here's some good bees. Here's Jim Brown. He's right here in the class with us. When I saw his hives here this winter, I go, hey, Jim, you got to send me a picture. I love this picture. So the bees are inside his fence. And for the bees to fly out here, they got to fly up over the fence. By the time they get that high, they're over the top of your head. they're not going to bother you. So fences are good for bees, or a hedge, something the bees have to fly over. If they have to fly over your fence to get to the neighbors, but by now they're so high, they're over the people's heads, and they won't be bothering the people. So I thank you, Jim, for letting me use this picture. I told you I would. Here's my old neighborhood picture, was the fence around your yard, put the bees out here in the full sun. If the bees fly over the fence to your neighbors through the trees, they're up high enough. I have an arborvitae windbreak beside one of my hives. Those arborvitaes must be 20 foot tall, and you can sit there and watch the bees do circles, like kind of like a helicopter, gaining altitude if they want to go north and up and over those trees. But they don't go around it, but they'll go up over the top. So by then, your neighbors probably won't know you have bees. Most of the time, your neighbors won't know you have bees unless they're in their swimming pool or they can see your hive, because the bees will disperse so much out of the hive, you won't have issues. But you don't want to shoot the bees across your yard straight into the neighbor's yard. Dogs and cats, pets. I usually tell people my dogs have all been stung once, but the dogs are usually smarter than kids, and they only get stung once, and they will usually leave the bees alone. My dogs avoid that area year round. They know where the beehive is. They give it a wide berth when they're out in the yard. I would be very leery of having a tied up dog out here. Let's say the doghouse is here and the beehive's here. That's way too close. Don't be doing that. The problem is something would happen and the bees get riled up, start stinging the dog. The dog has no way to get away if he's on a leash. If he can run away, they'll run and hide. My one dog likes to snap at the bees when they're flying low on cool spring days, but he gets stung. He doesn't learn very fast. The other one learned a lot quicker. Horses. I was at a seminar one time and they were talking about the smell of horses. If you ride your horse, you shouldn't work your bees. You should work your bees before your horses. There's something about the smell of horses. And I had some bees at a person's house for 4 or 5 years. Never bothered the horse. Horse was always around. Then one day the bees started stinging the horse. They moved the horse. A week later, the horse got stung again. The bees got moved. Don't know what exactly went on. The bees never bothered me. I went there the first time the horse got stung. I was there about an hour afterwards. Bees are all just peaceful and calm as could be, but there was something about that horse that got them riled up. So you need to be a little bit careful. In Jim's picture back here, here's Jim's chicken yard with a fence, and the chickens come in here and peck away. Chickens and bees seem to get along. I got bees, I got chickens. I've never seen them be an issue with either one. But I would at least, if I had really, really close neighbors, I would tell them about bees. Most people are more curious about bees than anything, unless you already got a neighbor that you don't get along with. Give them a jar of honey at the end of the year. Then pretty soon they really like your bees if they get some free honey. But I've seen some neighbor issues where the neighbors already didn't get along, and it doesn't take much for them to try to get zoning or something like that going. Field watch. We're kind of wrapping things up here, but field watch, if you have country bees, I would encourage you to sign up with Field Watch. It's a free service, and what it does is you will pin your property, your bee location on a map, and when the agricultural companies, primarily the only people that have ever called me were the people that apply chemicals with an airplane, but they will call me and tell me that they are going to spray on such and such a day. They're usually pretty good to work with. I've had them call me like at 2 p.m. and go, "Hey, we were going to spray." And I go, "Hey, can you spray that tomorrow morning, like first thing?" And they've always worked with me. And they'll, instead of spraying in the middle of the afternoon, because my bees are already out, because if they don't call you 24 hours ahead of time where you could get your bees locked up overnight, once dawn comes, the bees are out. I can't call them home. I've had that happen too, so there's not much I can do, but most of the time the airplane guys are pretty cool about it and call me ahead of time, give me the choice if I want to lock them up or not. With the way we register our bees for in the state of Ohio, they're public records, so you need to go through the public records to find out where our bees are. And most agricultural companies won't do that. But this is a one step and it's pretty handy. So I really recommend putting your bees on field watch if you're in the country, even if you're in town, if you want to do it. If you're in Lucas County has a sanitation district that sprays for mosquitoes. They do use the public information and they map out all the registered bee yards in the county, and they want to know where they're at. Jacob's going to talk to us at our May meeting. He's a beekeeper and he's also works for the sanitation district. He'll tell us how they spray, what they spray, when they spray. I was always really leery about what they did till they came and talked to us several years ago, and they are very good about this. In fact, they got 2 hives over at their headquarters. And they'll tell you it's much easier to kill mosquitoes with dunks in the water and kill them as larvae than it is killing live flying mosquitoes. That's the worst way to kill mosquitoes, is once they're adults. But sometimes they do daytime. If let's say your neighbor calls up and goes, "Hey, mosquitoes are really bad. Can you come over and spray?" They will do that. But if they know your beehives are next door, then they have other protocol to do. So if you're not registered, they don't know where your bees are. They've told me they've come around the corner already and run right into beehives sitting in people's yards that weren't registered. So they don't want to kill our bees. They only want to kill mosquitoes. Trust me on this. But if you don't want them spraying by your house, call this number, and you have to fill out a form. Maybe you can do it online now. I'm not positive, but talk to them, and get on the no spray list. Craig asked a question over the weekend with me about his inner cover didn't have a notch back here. And I told him usually the notches are the preference of the manufacturer. What I do is I put little small blocks in here to lift this lid up. So my outer cover is going to go over the top of this, and I put blocks of wood in here to lift it up. Right now, I have a small opening, about 1/8 to 3/8 of an inch back here. In the wintertime, our bees are warm. They're giving off respiration. So there's moisture. We need to vent that warm, moist air out of the hive. We don't want it freezing on the inner cover, because when we had that 10 below zero, it forms a big layer of frost here. And then when it warms up, that frost melts and drips on the bees, and wet bees are dead bees. The best way you kill your bees in the wintertime is to get them wet. So I leave a little gap here. Second, when we had the big blizzard and we had all that snow on the ground, if the front entrance of the beehive was blocked, the bees can still go out the lid and out this back area here and get out the lid if they need to, when it warmed up real quick and they need to go to the bathroom. I personally, I make a lot, if I make my own lids, I cut a notch back here. So I cut a notch in this area. So one, it lets a little more air out. The bees can get out. The other thing is, if I would have a robbing incident where the bees are getting robbed, not my bees are being robbed, not doing the robbing. My bees are usually accused of doing the robbing. I can shut this lid down and shut that entrance off when it's like this. Take my wood blocks out, put this down, the lid's tight now. If I have a notch back here, I can't do that. So now I got to duct tape it or find a block of wood or something to block that, because when you have a robbing incident, it's kind of like January 6th at the Capitol building. It looks like an insurrection. And the robbing bees are trying to get in any entrance they can get in. They aren't just going in the front door. They're going in the lid. They're going in cracks. They're around every crack of your hive trying to figure out how to get in, because the word's out that there's free honey. Sooner or later, you have the problems. You can see on this lid from the propolis stains where different blocks of wood sat there. I have all different thicknesses. Like I said, right now it's about 1/4, 3/8 of an inch. As summer gets here, the hotter it gets, the higher my lid gets. So I just keep raising it. I have all different sizes of blocks. I turn them sideways. I put them on end. When it gets to be, 90 degrees in the summertime and they got a lot of honey they're drying, my lids are way open. The bottoms are open. But as fall comes, I shut everything down again. So this is how I do my setup. Everybody does it a little bit different. If you have a notch back here and your lid's notched, you don't need quite so much ventilation. This is kind of how I was taught from my mentor. Is his quote was, you just put a pine cone or two underneath here. He didn't even use wood blocks, but I carry a whole 3-pound Folgers coffee can full of wood blocks starting out the year, and they go here and there, and it's just pieces of scrap wood. Every year is a little different. This picture was taken in 2014. I'll let you think about, anybody remember 2014 and how bad the winter was. I was starting to dig these hives out. This one didn't need dug out very much, but these two did. The time before, the snow mound went all the way to this point where you could just see the back of the hive, back of the lids, back of the hive. The bees were going in and out of the back of these lids. Another reason, if we have these crazy winters, the bees can go back out there to go to the bathroom. You can see the front of the hive was stained up. But every year is a little different. So this was March 14th of 2014. You can still see how much snow we had. And I know this was the third time I dug these hives out of this snowbank. In fact, over to the left, about 10 yards, there was a car buried in the snowdrift. So every year is different. People ask me, hey, when should I get my bees? Well, I never know what winter's going to do. We don't know what the weather's going to do. Every year's a little different. Here's one of the things I will encourage you to look at, and this is through Ohio State, a calendar using phenology, and that's using GDD, growing degree days. And yesterday we were up to 3 growing degree days so far for this year. Silver maples start blooming with 34 heating degree days. So, and this goes through the whole summer, all different plants, insects, when to look for them. Here's the website. It's very easy. You just put the date you want to check, put your zip code, click go, comes up. And like I said, every year's a little different. Here was 2018. For the same day, we were at 42 already. So at that point, the silver maples are in bloom. We have dogwoods in bloom. spring was here and just 3 years ago, this is what it looked like. The other 2 years, we were at like 6 and 8. So 42 is the odd year, and 3 is a little bit below normal, but almost a normal spring so far. So every year is different. So you can go on this, look every so often, you'll know what trees may be in bloom coming up that the bees may be enjoying. The bees really hit the maple trees. So that's usually the first indication of when things start blooming, is usually the bees start hitting the maples. So I think that was my last slide. So Craig, you have a question?
Why would I need to know when trees bloom? Aren't the bees just gonna go where the nectar is? I mean, you're not suggesting that I go out and plant trees.
Nope. They will find it, but you'd be surprised, Craig. The longer you work with bees, the more interested you get in. Like, this is a question that we get a lot. Hey, what's that purple pollen coming in on the bees? And usually I say, I don't know, because I'm like you on that question, Craig. I just want the bees to be bringing pollen in. I don't care where they get it. But it's just something to think about, and how our calendar, it's March 3rd today, isn't the bees calendar. We're very weather dependent here. Every year is going to be a little bit different, but you can scope out what may be in bloom soon. It's always fun to see the first pollen of the year coming in. Do you have another question, Craig, or anybody else with questions? Unmute yourself, ask questions, please.
Well, I have found these to be very interesting, these presentations you've made. I didn't know tonight was the last of the season. I hope that I guess I'm a member of the club for a year. And when are the regular meetings, and are they always Zoom meetings? I'm hoping that the club members will be a source of information. When I got a stupid question, I can talk to somebody about it. I'll probably call you. But
yeah, I was gonna put my slide here at the end again. I hope you guys all have my number. Yes. Our meetings are the third Tuesday of the month. You'll get they're still Zoom for now. My goal is to have like a summer field day where we open up some hives. We can get together maybe by the end of summer. When we meet in person, we meet at Wildwood Environmental Academy, which is across the side road on Holland, Sylvania from St. John's High School. So it used to be behind the old Don Pablo's, but it's in a building. It's like a charter school. They are very much into the science fields. So that's where we normally meet. Hopefully, maybe the end of the year we'll be meeting in person. Yes, everybody is invited to our club meetings. They start at 7:00. I'm usually on the air or at if we're meeting in person, I'm there about 6:30, and I'm there early to answer questions. I know how new people are. You don't want to ask that, Craig, you brought up the stupid question. They're not stupid questions, but I'm there to answer your questions. Maybe you don't want to ask during the meeting, but all of our members we're all there to help each other be better beekeepers. So you all are welcome. I encourage you to come because this is a never-ending learning experience. There's going to be lots of ups and downs. Jim and Tammy have been members for a year now. I'm sure they can vouch. There's lots of questions to be asked. I can't teach everything, my 25 years of knowledge in 6 or 8 hours here. I do the best we can. I'm gonna try to come up with some videos of some hive inspection, putting your package together. It might not be me doing it. It'll probably be like a recommendation of somebody else has already has done it. Why invent the wheel the second time? Remember that you all are in the internship class coming up on this Saturday morning. More education. Some of it will be a little bit of a repeat, but if it's being repeated, it must be pretty important because somebody else thought this, the same thing I did. So please come to those. If you can't, they're going to be recorded. You'll get an email on it. And unfortunately, a lot of things are still going to be Zoom. I could see, that's why I'm trying to save a field day towards the end. Maybe after Labor Day, we'll be able to meet in person. Yeah, people get vaccinated. We'll see how these vaccinations go. It's a lot more fun doing this in person than it is over Zoom, that's for sure. So did I answer your question there, Craig? It was a long answer.
Yeah, I think so. I'm just a little bit uneasy about going down and getting to Dwight down in Findlay, and he gives me 5 stacks of bees and waxes my combs for me, and and then I come back.
He'll give you a lot of good information too, and he can walk you through. I found out you'll go down to his place and you'll bring back a cardboard box with your bees in it. So it's a sealed up box that is made to ship bees in. So
they won't be on the combs. They'll just be a box of bees.
No, well, it'll be a cardboard box with 5 frames in it with your bees on the frames, but it'll be in a box sealed up, probably duct tape shut. So, but I'm sure he'll show you the queen if you want to look at the queen, and have him walk you through, the larvae and all that.
I suppose I should take my protective gear with me.
Yes, sir. Take your suit, take your gloves. Dwight will have his own smoker and hive tool, but take your protective gear when you go there.
And I'm going to get my wax from him. Will he just sell me a bar of wax and then I put that on myself when I get back here to Toledo?
Yeah.
Or do I need to take my hives with me?
No, he'll probably be pretty busy. So I would just expect to pick it up from him. Let him know that you want to buy some wax ahead of time.
Okay. All right. Is it okay to send you pictures if I have an inspection and I don't understand what it is I'm looking at?
Pictures are better than a description. Yes, very much so. Everybody, if you are looking at something you're not sure of, take a picture, send it to me. I'll tell you hopefully what it is. If not, maybe I need a little more description, but if you could tell me what's going on, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. So yes, sir.
And do you start treating for the varroa mites before you see them? I mean, is that something you start with day one as opposed to wait, or also those bugs, those beetles?
Well, the beetles, we usually wait till we see them. We encourage people to test for their mites to see where they're at. We don't want to just
on day one.
Or
more or less.
Yeah. We don't want to just treat willy-nilly, because if you don't have them, why put your bees through the stress of treating? Everything's a stress. Just like getting this vaccine, people are complaining about, sore arms and maybe feeling a little crappy for a day or two. That's, you're putting your body through that stress of being better. But same with the bees, it's not good for them. It kind of screws with them. So if you don't have to treat, where you're better off. But when it's time to treat, it's time to treat. Yes, sir. So
but
that's why
you start within the first 30 days. I would treat.
I would test. Take that alcohol and scoop up 300 bees and see where your mites are.
And
Uh,
300 bees is a jar full? You don't count individual bees, do you?
no, we don't count individual bees, and it won't be that many. So I'm trying to get rid of this share screen. Stop share. There will be a line inside that cup.
Okay.
And if you look at your booklet here, or get online, they'll show you how to work that, how to do, I know there's a little video. Yeah. Jim says a half a cup is 300 bees, but I know there's a line in that. I have a half cup scooper that I have in my toolbox that I use. So,
And you can get those jars from the Honeybee Health Coalition, or you got to buy them from?
you might be the bee supply places have them. You may get one at Tractor Supply if they're selling all the other. I got a flyer in the mail just for everybody. Man Lake's got their annual 9% off March sale. So everything in the catalog's 9% off. Some of the other stuff's higher. Over $100 free shipping. So if you haven't bought your stuff yet, any other questions? We got to get Jim's bees to live through the year. Got to get Angie and Emma's bees. Emma and Angie had the same problem as you, Jim. They were alive a month ago and dead this week. So you weren't the only one. It was tough. So, and who knows? I know you did an alcohol wash. You saw a lot of mites. So it was just, the last stressor pushed them over the edge. So. Anyone else with any questions? Anything else you want answered?
Do you have a preferred place to get the supplies? I was looking at this beekeeping book or magazine, and on the back from Peerco, they sell the Verolomite jar.
Yep. Like I said, just about everybody's selling that jar right now. Okay. And I know I sent out a Word document with all the bee suppliers that I can wrangle up. I don't have a preferred one, Craig. Whoever's cheapest, primarily. I'm a tightwad. I'm frugal, but I do prefer some places over others, for certain things. But I've been around long enough. I have a couple of connections with the Amish, which is good, but the Amish don't have a phone either. So you got to do things snail mail. So it makes it difficult for new people to do the snail mail thing.
Well, I've forgotten already what kind of stuff you kill the mites, Verolomites with. So I'll probably call you again.
There's a whole section, but like I said, the Honeybee Health Coalition thing, it's online. Honeybee Health Coalition.
Okay. All right, I got that.
This is the Bible. So, and we gave
that.
Yep, it's in the book. And if you want to go online, and they have videos of how to apply all those chemicals that we talked about. So,
all righty, that's good.
Yep. They've done a really good job of, we're trying to educate everybody.
The Honeybee Health Coalition also has an online, it's like a tool you can use where you can type in what you want to use. If you want to use organic, or if you wanted to use chemicals, and then it just works you through. You type in, you click on what you want to do, and it will give you solutions to use. It's a really nice tool if you just go online to the Honeybee Health Coalition.
Does that work online and as an app on your phone both?
I don't know about the app. I've only
I know they
one.
have. Well, you've used the online one. I know they have an app for your phone too, Deb. So if you're in an out yard, you don't even have to go home to get in your laptop. But so, yep. They've done a lot of good work there. That's why I call that the Bible of Verolomite treatment.
And if you can't find alcohol, I used what Randy
Windshield
Oliver
washer.
Randy Oliver suggested you could use a gallon of water with a tablespoon or two of Dawn dish soap, and it works really well. Cheaper than alcohol.